is presenting some very important information today about warehouse receiving. I think even a little quarantine too, maybe. I'll leave the topic up to her, of course. But in the meantime, like I said, we are trying to record this, and I will also try to send out a survey afterwards to get some feedback on the topic and what topics in the future might be helpful, and then also technology feedback too, because we're always looking to improve that. All right, Jessica, over to you.
Did you say that the topic was up to me so I could completely change it right now?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. Good. How do you guys feel about dogs? That's all I can talk about. All right. So hopefully, the quarantine and the warehouse receiving PO process has been in place for a couple of months. I mean, quarantine's been years, but it did pick up more so recently. And then as well as a warehouse PO. So hopefully a lot of you are already kind of familiar with what those are. And if you're not, hopefully this will give you a little bit better understanding. So we can kind of cover those and then see where some of the gaps are in this presentation. With the warehouse PO, it's also kind of considered a shadow PO because it's more or less just an internal purchase order once you place your vendor purchase orders for incoming inventory. So, ad hoc orders won't have this, but any inventory sales orders or purchase orders will have this kind of additional PO created so that our warehouse team can seamlessly, ideally, process the receipt of the inventory. There is a file that does kind of outline some of that I already shared on Workplace. So you can access that file for some quick information about the warehouse PO. So as I said, it's an internal PO to receive against the actual inventory item. Previously, the warehouse would just have the vendor PO that they, receive when the product comes on the dock. It references the decoration PO. So that PO is just set up to the items that are like a setup charge or run charge. We can't do anything with that PO to actually receive the inventory in. So the receiving team would have to process an inventory adjustment to receive the inventory into NetSuite. So it's a separate transaction, unrelated to the incoming purchase order that they would have to do to get the inventory into NetSuite and available for shipping. So a lot of the issues were the errors in the manual process. So either through numbers, referencing that PO, making sure the items were correct, just because the only reference to the item would be, in the job name with the SKU number. You would have no direct PO to say, okay, this is the KBB 123. And so if you weren't diligent about making sure that your sales order referenced the right SKU in the job name, there'd be a lot of confusion within the receiving department of what to actually receive. There's a disconnect between the vendor PO and the inventory adjustment. So they're unrelated, lack of visibility between those. They would reference the PO number, but it's not a direct link between that purchase order and the actual adjustment receiving in inventory. Oops. And there's no visibility for the inventory on order. So that's one of the biggest things I think will help with what Emily and Noah do, is that reordering process. So when they actually evaluate what to reorder, they have the visibility to see what is actually already incoming. So we're not going to duplicate purchase orders for incoming inventory or replenishments. So the new process is more about creating that purchase order. And when that comes on dock, we can actually do an item receipt directly to the inventory. So as soon as it receives on dock, we will now see the inventory in NetSuite. It might not be available for anybody to do anything with it, but we at least have that visibility of not only it's incoming on order, but once it's in NetSuite, where it is in the process, whether it be tagging or put away. Also for the warehouse, they can actually do all of it on their handhelds. So they're not going to the computer, having to process it. Everything can be done through scanning barcodes and receiving the inventory directly through the handhelds. The transactions will be linked. So from a item record, you can look at the purchase order for that item. You can look at the item receipt that was done on that item, how many was received, how many remain open on that purchase order. Was it originally for 50? We only received 48. So where are the other two? So we just have that better visibility into the linked transactions. Some of the issues, well, at least have one issue, is Kevin might say there's more, but I only mentioned one, is that if you have a SKU that has changed on a sales order or the quantity has changed on a sales order, you have to then also update that purchase order for the warehouse. They are not linked to sync any edits. It only is based off of the initial sales order once it's approved to generate the purchase orders, the vendor purchase orders. So you will have to be aware that any changes you make to the sales order will then also have to be made to this purchase order. I think we came across one recently where the item SKU was changed and it caused some confusion with the warehouse. So just be aware that you might have to do some duplicate effort depending on what you are changing on the sales order. All right, so as I said, it is generated once the sales order is approved. So when the shared services team is ready to generate the purchase orders, they click this approve button and this purchase order is automatically created directly to the SKUs that you put on the sales order on the line level. So once you're creating your sales order, you have to go to this items tab and enter in the inventory SKU number. So whatever you put in here at the time that this order is approved, that's what the PO is going to be generated for. So it's in this quantity. Simple enough, I think, right? With that, you have visibility into what the purchase order is for the incoming inventory. So on the sales order, you'll see under the customer shipping information, you have this link to the inventory purchase order. Under related records, you're going to see warehouse POs. So you can see what PO, what item, what the quantity was for, and what's been received. So you're going to have visibility in a lot of places. If you ever want to say, I need to get to this, what's my purchase order for the incoming inventory, it should be very accessible to you from a sales order perspective, as well as, I don't have screenshots in here. I might have it here, maybe not. But on the item record, when you go to related records, you can actually filter down by purchase orders so you can see the incoming purchase order as well. So there's lots of visibility into the PO. From a vendor purchase order side, we also have the same link to the receiving PO on the vendor PO, as well as in the related records. So you can access it from both the sales order and the vendor POs. The warehouse receiving purchase order will have a link back to the sales order. So if you have that PO number, you can always find what sales order it relates to from there. So all the POs are created to Touchstone Merchandise Group. So it's just an internal purchase order. Links to the originating sales order, and then the PO items are the inventory SKUs that you're going to receive against. And on that purchase order, you can see the quantity initially ordered and the quantity received. So for receiving the purchase order, the warehouse will receive the box, the packing slip will reference the decoration PO. When they pull up that purchase order, they'll print it out for the vendor decoration PO. We do have a barcode on that PO that allows them to scan in the warehouse PO so that they don't have to go anywhere in NetSuite to try to find it. They just pull up what the vendor sends on their record, on the packing slip, and they can pull up the receiving PO, scan it into their handhelds, and then it pops up with the items that are to be received. So they can easily go into their handhelds, see what items are on the purchase order, and then receive in the appropriate quantity here. So the other part is the on-order visibility. So when you look up any item in NetSuite, we can have the on-hand, the committed, back-ordered, available, and then what is on order. So we know that 150 units of this t-shirt are on a purchase order incoming into NetSuite. So that, while like Noah does his review, if his, the demand says we should have order 100, well, we would stop and say, we're already getting 150. We don't need to order 100 more. Previously, we wouldn't have that visibility, and he would have to go searching for open sales orders to see if there was something already placed. So it just helps a lot. Native NetSuite, we weren't using for a long time. So we have just kind of increased our visibility and use of what native NetSuite can do for us within the system. There was something I was thinking of just a moment ago, but I kind of blanked on what it is now.
Jessica, can I ask a question?
Yes.
So this is something that I have visibility to, even though Noah does primarily the reordering for Progressive.
Yes. So if I look up, where's that? KNB. What was that? 051. KND 051. Okay. This is probably good to show you the different navigation on even just looking at the item record, what visibility you might have to search for just different information. So initially, the first tab, purchasing and inventory, if you scroll to the bottom, it's going to tell you how many is on hand, of any committed you might have available or on order. So we can see that this is now populated. So, looking at this, it just says 150. I think I just remembered what I was thinking of. On the purchase order that's created, we do put an expected ship date on there, and that's based off of your sales order as well. So even if you did make, you ordered it and it said you originally thought it was going to be in 2 weeks, if it turns out to be 4, the original PO for the warehouse is still going to say 2 weeks out. So even for planning for the warehouse, if you can update that purchase order's like ship date, we can plan out for the warehouse with their incoming inventory and resources needed to potentially do tagging or any of the receiving put away activity involved with that. So this doesn't tell you much of anything except for something's on order. There's 2 ways that you can find more detail related to what that 150 is. One tab would be this inventory SKU orders tab. And this will show you all these sales orders we've processed related to this item. So once we started putting in that inventory SKU field on sales orders, we have visibility into what sales order and the quantity we are ordering for that item. You can see these top 2 have these inventory POs. So we know that since we started the new process, we have 2 sales orders that have used this inventory warehouse receiving PO. So from here, we can even see that it's 150, and then we know this. Here's the link to the inventory PO. And we do have a ship date of 3/2, an expected receipt date of 3/6. So that can be one way to look at the visibility of more detail, what PO, what sales order, what time frame is my inventory going to be there. So let me look at, so there's this received by, is that 3/6? That comes from your sales order. And again, if you change the sales order, it won't update the purchase order. So best practice would be to update both if possible. The other way to look at some of the visibility is under related records. You can look up specifically purchase orders. And these are purchase orders directly linked to that item record. So we can see the 150 is still pending receipt. We haven't received it yet. This first one that we did was for 30. We see that we received 30. The other transaction and item receipt related to that, you can also filter down to look at. So for this 30, we can see the actual item receipt, what purchase order it was from, and the actual items on it. So, are there questions about the PO process and does it make sense? In general, what we're trying to do is streamline the process for receiving using native NetSuite as well for the receiving and on order process. For years, because we don't own the inventory, we bill the customer, we are issuing the purchase orders to vendors for their product and not actually doing a purchase order for ourselves to buy the t-shirt and receive it as a finished good. So this is kind of a workaround so that we can accommodate both issuing the purchase orders to the vendor as well as having this receiving PO to streamline the process of actually bringing in inventory. I'll move to quarantine next, and hopefully there won't be too many questions on this. So I would even say I have pictures of the warehouse. I think this is a recent change that they've done out there to section off their process of receiving inventory in to help streamline it, organize it, make sure things aren't getting lost or missed in their process. I would say it's probably maybe a month old. So they have these lanes set up 1 through 10. Their first 5 lanes are just for inbound receiving. So if they receive 10 different products today, they're going to put it in different lanes. They're going to review the product versus the packing slip, go through that process. If it doesn't meet the standards, they'll move it to the quarantine. You guys get notifications of that. So there's 3 lanes for quarantine, as well as 2 lanes for once everything is resolved and ready to put away. They'll put it in the last 2 lanes so that the put away team will be able to take the product and put it on the shelf. So it's definitely more organized. It's more structured. So I think that has helped in the process too, for what's coming in. Any product that has issues or any product that doesn't have issues can go straight to ready to receive. So some of the reasons that quarantines happen. So this is their checklist of items that they look at. So if there's no packing slip, they don't know what the PO is for, what item it's for. So it's going to get put into quarantine. The product isn't packaged according to our requirements. So if it's not bagged or even tagged with the actual SKU, it will go to quarantine, because if they receive in 5 different sizes of t-shirts and there's no reference to what sizes those should be, and it's going to take quite a bit of time for the warehouse to determine that and figure everything out. So the PO doesn't have SKU numbers. Ideally with the warehouse PO process, that should be eliminated. So even with the warehouse PO being generated from the sales order, if you have any product that's third party or incoming inventory, a PO, an internal PO should be generated so that the warehouse can receive it. So it kind of stretches outside of even just this warehouse PO process, but anything coming into the warehouse should ideally have a purchase order so that we can receive it against. So quantity issues, missing packages, damaged boxes, those will also go into quarantine. Once a quarantine is created, the person that they assign to it will receive an email we see up in the right hand corner. So you'll get that notification. You can click on that link and it'll lead you directly to the quarantine record. All quarantines should have a picture and a comment of what the issue is. So hopefully that will help you indicate to help you figure out how to resolve it or what the concern is. Replying to the email will not resolve the quarantine. So ideally there's processes in place to eliminate the receiving team from having to use their email. So we definitely would want to encourage you to use those processes so that you're not waiting on them to reply. And so that we have kind of that transactional or history with the quarantine to see what the resolutions need to be. So there's a few things that are used to help resolve it. So warehouse request, a PO, a work order request, or a shipping request. So I would think that most of these are a PO or a warehouse request to resolve. And you'll have that navigation in NetSuite under warehouse requests to submit, as well as work orders to submit. So depending on what the quarantine is what action you actually need to take to resolve it. So within the quarantine, once you have your number created from that warehouse request or work order request, you put it into this part of the quarantine and it will automatically kind of close it on your end, but then submit it for the warehouse team to know that they need to do an action. So we have a list of all active quarantines here, but then ones with resolution, we see that there's a number or reference populated in this warehouse shipping work order request number field. And the warehouse team will use that to then determine what action needs to be done on your quarantine based off of what you submitted. So they review this daily to make sure that anything that you've updated from a quarantine perspective can be closed out, resolved, and put in the inventory.
There's that report that shows like your active ones and like the resolution number. How do we get access to that?
So hopefully, if not everybody has the tab My Programs.
Okay.
It may or may not depend on your role, and I can look at it later just to make sure that there's access for everybody. But under receiving management, there should be a link to active quarantine orders, and then there's the one with quarantine with resolution. You can also
Yeah, I might need you to add that for me, because I think that like one of my struggles is I'll like do a quarantine thing, it'll create a case, and then I won't see anything on that case until it's closed out. So like a better list of like how to follow up on those, because I won't have the list anymore if I close the quarantine. So I think that would be a great resource.
Okay.
And then I'm going to put in the chat too, just for everyone. I've mentioned this to a few people before. I know like sometimes the warehouse will have things come in that like don't have a PO referenced, or there's not a logo, or there's like something weird with it that they have no idea who it goes to. So like I know it'll go into the quarantine log, but not necessarily be assigned to anyone. So I just would recommend checking that every now and then too, to make sure that you guys don't have anything pending. There's not many now, but I just know that I myself have come across a few that I didn't know were even in there. So just wanted to share that.
Steve, I saw you jump on. Do you have anything to add?
No, you did a great job. I mean, there's nothing.
Thank you, Jessica.
Everything's clean, so you guys are doing a good job. The vendors are doing a good job. So just stay on top of it, and then we'll get it resolved as quickly as possible.
Thank you guys. I appreciate it.
Me too. Thanks.
Thanks, Jess.
Thanks.
Thanks, Jess.
Thank you guys so much.